Hello everyone, my name is Neanderthal Joe and welcome to today's video. Within this video I will be talking about how I think and others think Neanderthals hunted large ungulates and proboscideans, animals like the bison, aurochs, and the mighty mammoth. But first, let's hear from today's first guest, Ryan Gill from Hunt Primitive.
Hey Joe, thanks for asking me some of these questions. I'm going to have to be going kind of pure on speculation and just my personal theory because Neanderthals are not really my area of expertise. But I can at least tell you how I would run at it. So if we want to think about if we're going to hunt, these large proboscideans, I would say, if we've got 10 people and Neanderthal technology, which is basically throwing spears, thrusting spears. I don't think you're going to be doing a lot of thrusting into mammoths or, mastodons. I think throwing is going to be your best option. And I would say anything that you could use potentially to slow down the animal would be beneficial, but I don't know that it would always be really practical. So the idea of like digging out these, massive pit traps or something along those lines, and then trying to herd, these animals into that. I don't know how practical it is to really dig that, and I don't know how herdable these animals really would be. As we see elephants today, you kind of can't make them go places that they don't want to go, so you'd have to somehow get them to want to go in that. But I think maybe with the simplest solution is oftentimes the easiest or the best solution. And with that, I would say if we're going to have several guys, first off, I would say we would be going after small ones, or either really really old ones or really young ones, or whichever one's probably not going to get us killed quite as easily. But without a doubt, these are really really dangerous animals, and there's ideas of them running up and chopping the Achilles tendon, or thrusting spears into them like you see on television. And I really don't think we're going to be seeing much of that because you're pretty much just going to get killed. Even if you get up close enough and you accomplish it, very, very high likelihood you're going to get killed in the process, either right before, during, or immediately after. So the simplest and really the easiest solution would be, of course, to throw these spears, and then keep in mind that you don't have to put a whole bunch of spears into it, nor do you have to try to put one through the heart and lungs like we do today. If you're talking about just strictly killing the animal and everybody trying to keep their lives doing it, becoming at it from all different directions but not getting too close, confusing the animal, maybe it chases after some people, after a while it tires a little bit. Then when somebody finally gets close enough and they can really start throwing their spears, all it takes is one spear to penetrate the guts just enough to really cause that animal to go septic. And then I would say then you can follow it around and just kind of let it do its thing, and within, I don't know how long it would take a mammoth to succumb to septicemia, but it's probably somewhat similar to a deer, just bigger. So therefore I would say anywhere from 1 to 2 days. And then I would say when it comes to really processing that out, what that would look like, about like anything else in early times, get as much as you can, as fast as you can, get the parts that you really want to avoid some of the predators. So you're going to have some people that are kind of on predator watch at any given time, but of course you got a bunch of people there. You're going to defend the kill without a doubt, unless you're, absolutely in some of these areas that maybe have stuff like hyenas and that kind of stuff that we see in Africa today where they're going to gang up on you. That's when it would start getting to be a little bit of an issue. But for the most part, defend the kill, process out as much as you can in the amount of time that you have, and maybe you literally have enough of a foothold in this location that you can camp and basically live right there until this animal is completely processed out. And I would say time-wise, I couldn't really tell you because I've never done a proboscidean, but I would assume, at least by watching some films, when you're using metal tools, villagers in Africa, they can knock down an elephant in about a day. But of course, using Stone Age tools, we can decrease that a little bit, or increase the amount of time that it's going to take, decrease the efficiency. So hopefully that, that's what we would kind of see, is they would at least be getting as much as they could before any sort of spoiling really happens. And that, of course, is going to depend on weather conditions or overall climate. Is it relatively cool out or is it super hot in that particular time of year? Now, the tools associated with this, mostly smaller projectiles and then using larger blades for skinning and boning off meat. And without a doubt, there is this big misconception that, to kill a big animal, you need a great big spear point. And that's actually opposite of what you need, because trying to force this huge spear point into this animal is a very, very tough thing to do, and most times really impossible. So what you're going to be doing is using these smaller projectiles on the ends of your throwing spears and just trying to get in there enough. And it doesn't have to be that much to really puncture the guts of an animal like this. It's going to be the softer spot of the animal, but you need the penetration. And remember, if you're throwing these things, if you got these big spear or these great big spear blades on them, when you go to throw them, one miss and the point's gone, right? But if you have these smaller ones, a less chance of them breaking. And realistically, you're not even looking so much for the blade to cut like we think today. What you're looking for is a very small projectile at the tip that basically just helps cut the skin and cut a little bit of organ tissue to go in there to do the damage. So we're not looking at the massive hemorrhage that we would be expecting to see with these big giant bladed points, because it's unnecessary and a huge waste of that resource. But those big blades do come in really handy for removing skin and meat and sinew and whatever bones as well you want to disarticulate from the carcass. Of course, we've not taken apart a Pravicidian, an elephant, today. I don't really have access to those, but of course bison now we've worked on a couple times, and that's not near the size, but it does give you a little bit of scale where, when you work through a deer or a hog by yourself, and then a bison becomes quite a bit of work, and you get a couple people to help you out. And so you can see where having all those extra hands would be really, really handy in early times, especially for these biggest animals. And that's why you would really be targeting, if you're trying to target these larger animals, it's because you have a lot more people to feed, and you can do that by killing one animal. So you all come together, work as a team, bring down the animal, everybody takes down the animal, and now everybody's got their food.
As most people will know, Neanderthals were short, stocky people that were incredibly robust. We also know that they were excellent sprinters and might have been ambush hunters. Recent evidence based on reconstructions of the Schöningen spears show that Neanderthals crafted them to be thrown. So, with all this information, how do I think Neanderthals hunted these massive beasts? We must first look to the hills of Jersey at the site of Le Camp de Saint-Reberlade, where it appears Neanderthals commonly hunted mammoth and brought back parts of their body to the site. Originally, it was thought that the hills of Jersey was a game drive, much like how the plains natives would do buffalo jumps. Speaking of buffalo jumps, let's hear from Sean Sullivan and Amiel, who gives an outsider perspective in the Middle East.
Alright. Hello, my name is Sean. I am the experimental archaeology consultant and presenter for the Colossal Fossils Natural History Museum out of Wausau, Wisconsin. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Neanderthal hunting techniques, particularly big game hunting. Before we get into that, a couple points I'd like to mention. First thing, the fossil record is woefully incomplete. A good site might give us 10% of what was actually in use by the people there. The further back you go, the less complete it is. More often than not, all we find is the stone tools. And just a rock by itself could, of course, be used as a tool, but oftentimes there's other parts. We don't find the clothes, the bone spearheads, things like this that could have also been used. So there's an awful lot of conjecture that goes into figuring out what ancient hunter-gatherers were doing. One of the ways that I get around that in my own research is studying modern-day hunter-gatherers, and as closely as one can, trying to fit their techniques and tools into what we see represented in the fossil record. And when it comes to Neanderthals, discoveries that have come out over the past 10, 12, 15 years have shown us very clearly that our old picture of Neanderthals was wrong. They were very, very much like us. In fact, when Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were living in the same time, living in the same area, their technology seemed to be really equivalent in every way that counts. Neanderthals were absolutely the equals of the Homo sapiens of the day. The reason we're here and they're not is still open to question in my mind, but it probably comes down to group size and mobility. It's a different discussion altogether, though. Now, when it comes to Neanderthals hunting, very likely, just like most hunter-gatherers, they were opportunistic foragers, which means if a hunting group went out to, say, go on a mammoth hunt, well, that rabbit that just scurried into the brush over there would absolutely be on the menu. Our hunters would have a little, road snack, something to eat at camp at night while they're going out after their mammoth. Now, hunting a mammoth is a big event. This isn't something that a group's going to do regularly or once a month or something like that. It's probably something that's going to happen in the fall for a couple of reasons. One, when it's a nice cool day like today, the world becomes your walk-in freezer or walk-in fridge. On a hot summer day, meat can spoil. It can go toxic in as little as 4 to 6 hours. So if you have something the size of an elephant, your meat's going to spoil before you can actually process it. Now, in the fall and the winter, you open up that gut cavity, you get the cool air in there, and you're going to be able to allow yourself enough time to process all of that meat and all of those resources. Another reason, a very important reason, especially for early Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, is that in the fall, those mammoths have been grazing and putting on fat and weight all summer long. That meat is its tenderest and richest, fattiest, and most nutritious in the fall. So that is when, lack of a better word, the harvest is ripe. Now, when it comes to hunting something the size of an elephant with a spear like this, Neanderthals are at a little bit of a disadvantage. Our Homo sapiens were using a tool called Oplatl, a spear thrower, which allowed them to put some distance, put some range on. Elephants are dangerous animals to hunt. If we look at contemporary sources, one of my favorites is a book called Death in the Dark Continent by Peter Hathaway Capstick. He's a big game hunter from the turn of the last century. He has several accounts of elephant hunters who, elephant hunters don't reach old age and they don't die well. Elephants are smart animals. They remember, they learn, they're intelligent enough to be vindictive. And he has several accounts of elephant hunters who were caught by the elephant and dismembered and beaten to death between trees. They use their trunk to do a lot of damage. If you're really lucky, they just kind of squish you like a bug. And these are men who are using modern day rifles for all intents and purposes, large gauge elephant guns. And Neanderthals, though they did have throwing spears, they had javelins, something like this that they could throw. I think they were probably using their thrusting spears for game like mammoths. And the reason for that is accounts of pygmies, tribes from the Congo region of Africa hunting forest elephants, and their technique for doing it. Now the pygmies will use the landscape to their advantage. They find a spot in the forest where the elephant can't maneuver very well. They have hunters hop out of ambush in front of the animal, spears in hand, and they're just trying to pause it, to force it to stop. Then they have a chosen hunter who comes around behind and actually puts the spear in the side, back, kind of underneath the animal, the softer belly skin, lengthwise through the animal. After they do that, they bolt, they hide until the animal dies of blood loss. They have very specialized spears that they use for this. It's a sort of a prestige hunt. It's not something that's done regularly. Now, if we apply these pieces of information to our Neanderthals, we can imagine a Neanderthal mammoth hunt starting out as a big event in the fall. The leaves have started to change, the air has gotten cold, the herds are coalescing to start to migrate, and so our village of Neanderthals sends a couple of runners out to neighboring villages, tribes, clans, caves, family groups. They did seem to stay in smaller groups, and they gather together. We get, say, 10 or 12 hunters, a good-sized group, and they grab their long spears, probably in the order of 10 to 15 feet long. Some of these woolly mammoth tusks were 10, 11 feet in length. They had a huge reach. And they go hunting. As they're wandering, they're foraging, they're gathering, they're taking small game, maybe wild pigs, deer, rabbits, nuts and berries that are left over, anything they can find to keep themselves fed and in good condition for when they do get to the herd. When they find the mammoth herd, they're not just going to charge in with their spears. They're going to scout out the area. They're going to pick an ambush point. It might be glacial debitage around the edge of a watering hole on a game trail, maybe hills and valleys, something to that effect, where they have the ability to corner that mammoth in such a way that it cannot maneuver to effectively fight them off. Next thing, they're going to either pick an individual that is on its own. Say young males tend to leave the herds, the females tend to stick together. Elephants are matriarchal in their group hierarchy, and they're going to focus on a lone individual. A group of mammoths, of elephants, is next to impossible without modern hunting equipment like rifles. It's just too many animals capable of defending themselves. Once they've got that individual, they're either going to wait until they have the opportunity, say like a deer hunter in the blind waiting for the perfect buck, or more likely they're going to try to drive it into their trap. I would think that fire used as a driving tool would be the method for that. Use of fire for game drives and for hunting and as a sort of a hunting tool is something that shows up a lot throughout the world, Africa, Australia, North America. It's a common technique. And once you've got your mammoth into your ambush spot, our Neanderthal hunters with their long lances are going to come out, spears at the ready, and they've got to pause that animal, they've got to stop it. And they're really just distracting it. They aren't going to stab it from the front, they're not going to sort of sword fight with its tusks. They're just there to act as a wall, a spiky obstacle. A mammoth is going to bow up and wave its tusks and trumpet, and while it's doing that, their chosen hunter, the highest status, strongest, fastest, best with a spear, however they choose, we'd have to go back in time and ask them. That hunter is going to come around behind and run the length of his spear, the full length, into the underside, the belly, from behind the rib cage, in front of the hind leg, and try to get the spear point up into the heart and lung area to do as much internal damage as possible. As soon as that spear is in its full length, he's going to run out from under that mammoth, try not to get stomped on, and the rest of the hunters, seeing that, are going to scatter. Hopefully, with luck, the mammoth won't chase after them and catch one of them. And ideally, if our spearman has done his job well, that mammoth will die fairly quickly of exsanguination, of blood loss. Internal damage and hemorrhaging will kill an animal fairly quickly. A large animal like a mammoth can even still, with a good hit, take minutes or up to a half an hour, maybe more, to fully succumb to its wounds, especially with the spear still in there, kind of acting as a plug. Now, once that's happened, the mammoth dies. A couple of very important things have to happen pretty quickly. Our group of hunters have to get to the kill and confirm that it is in fact dead, because you don't want to walk up on a wounded animal. They have to start butchering it. They've got to get it opened, get the gut out, and get the meat cooling as quickly as possible. They're going to have to defend it from other predators. bears, wolves, lions, hyenas, all kinds of things that will be happy to take their food. And one or two of the individuals is going to go back to the village from where they came from, and they're going to tell the women and the children, the hunters that didn't come, the elders, whoever's left, that it's time to pack up and we're going to take you back to the site. And he's going to lead them back to that kill site. They're going to set up a camp around that and process that entire animal. While that's happening, the hunters themselves have already started to process it. They're cooking up the liver and turning the meat into steaks and jerky and other kinds of food, rendering out the fat and preserving as much as they can. By the time they're finished processing it, they could have multiple tons of food, enough to last a clan or two an entire winter. And they'll actually potentially have an entirely new shelter. Some evidence that the bones, tusks, and hide of the mammoth were actually built into usable huts. And with that, you have hopefully a little bit of an idea or an image into how Neanderthals, and probably our ancient ancestors, Homo sapiens as well, would have hunted the largest animals on their landscape.
So the answer to the question probably varies greatly depending on time period, region, even season of the year, I'm sure. And the Neanderthals in the Levant, at least, by the end of the Middle Paleolithic, they were certainly hunting with stone-tipped spears, and they were probably employing tactics that were developed in the region in later periods as well, like using topographic landscape features to funnel or drive animals into kill zones where other hunters were then waiting for them to finish them off, or similar tactics that are like the North American Plains Indians' buffalo jumps, but in this case, not buffalo. From a purely technological point of view, the Neanderthals are often associated heavily with the Levallois point, and these are often assumed to have been hafted in somewhat of a thrusting configuration. But it's also been demonstrated that they could have been used as throwing javelins, and I personally believe that it's not beyond the scope of possibility, especially by the end of the Middle Paleolithic, that Neanderthals could have developed some sort of device to impart extra momentum into their projectiles, very similar to what we know as an atlatl today in North American terms. Where the rest of their hunting strategies and tactics are kind of shrouded in mystery, we like to look at the anthropological data, and that would leave us to believe that they used a lot of trapping for small game especially, but it's also possible that they could have been familiar with plant-based or animal-based poisons that could render an animal paralyzed or sedated or some other effect.
Now, with modern thinking, we know that the original thinking was wrong. For one, it would have been next to impossible for the Neanderthals to drive the game up the cliff. Something that could not have happened, as the mammoth are too large to make it up the cliffs of Jersey. And Jersey at one time was not an island and was once connected to the mainland UK via a massive plain full of rivers. Another thing to note is that the cliffs of Legrand de Saint Bernard would have been an excellent scouting spot, as it would have given the Neanderthals a full view of the plains below, making it easier to spot the massive woolly beasts. To make this video simple, we will primarily focus around the hills of Jersey and how Neanderthals might have hunted mammoth, although later on I will be talking about how I think they hunted aurochs and bison. Personally, I think the use of fire would have been necessary. Fire would help scare the herd and separate the weak/young from the animals in their prime. Driving the herd apart, it makes it easy to single out and help minimize the danger of the other because, as we know, elephants, and we can assume mammoth, are very fast, intelligent, and protective animals. Next, like others have said, I believe they would use a stab and pursue method. What I mean by that is that I think one Neanderthal would either stab the mammoth or throw his spear. This would cause the animal to start running or stand its ground. And then this would start the hunt. Circling like wolves at other canines, they would look for opportunities to strike. Then, once the group of hunters has thrown all their spears, they would then follow the mammoth until it either succumbs to its injuries or dies of septic shock. That was method 1, and it's the method I think is the most possible. Method 2 is less likely as it involves traps. When I was first interested in the Neanderthals, I figured they would trap these giant beasts by digging a pitfall trap. But now that I'm older and a little more knowledgeable on the subject, I know that this would have been next to impossible, at least during cold spells. Jersey at the time would have been cold, most of the time, like I said previously. With the presence of permafrost, digging a mammoth-sized pit would have been next to impossible. It would have taken days, if not weeks, if not months. And as we know, proboscideans are very intelligent, and they try to avoid those sort of things. Another trap could have been pushing rocks over a ledge if they could somehow wait for the animal to walk near an edge where they can push rocks off. However, the waiting around for this would have been a waste of time, and the likelihood of this happening makes me think this would not be the method used, unless the perfect opportunity showed itself. The last trap involves fire. I do think fire would have played a pivotal part in the hunting of mammoth. Modern day elephants and other proboscideans, it's really only mammoth nowadays, but think of all the large animals out there. They all hate fire and go to any lengths to avoid it, so why wouldn't the mammoth? A few hunters carrying torches, they could have made a distraction, forcing the mammoth to focus on the fire rather than the other predators, giving the rest of the hunters opportunities to drive their spears into the sides of the mammoth. And then, as the first mentioned, they would pursue the prey and wait for it to die. With the segment on traps being over, let's hear from author of the Dreamer series, E.A Meigs, on how she thinks Neanderthals would melt ice to use as a trap for mammoth. Hey everyone, today with me again is E.A Meigs, who wrote the Dreamer series, and today we're going to ask her thoughts and opinions on how a group of Neanderthals would hunt a large or a mammoth or other large ungulates like bison or aurochs. So I'm gonna mute now, and we're just gonna listen to you for a few minutes.
Okay, thanks for having me on, Joe. It's always good to speak with you. Most of my research was on mammoth hunting. When I worked for Fish and Wildlife, I had a lot of interaction with the hunters, and I took a lot of hunting data. So I already had a pretty fair background with hunting deer and wild boar, etc. But I didn't know a lot about hunting mammoths. So I did extensive research on modern day elephants because that's really the closest comparison we have. Because to hunt an animal, besides knowing the landscape and being able to use the landscape to your advantage, you really have to know your prey. And something the size of a mammoth is fairly daunting to begin with. So I did a whole lot of research on, like I say, modern day elephants, because it's really the closest we have to go on. What seemed to be the general idea is to kill a animal the size of an elephant or a mammoth, that you had to have minimum penetration of 7 or 8 inches to get through the skin, which could be up to 1 inch thick, and up to 4 inches of fat before you could finally get down to where you might be able to hit an organ to make a lethal strike. And an animal that size, you might need to make several lethal strikes to bring it down. So I was looking at an animal that size, and their social structure. The herds were matriarchal, and that there would be a lead cow, and then there would be the younger cows and the juveniles and infant offspring. And once the males reached sexual maturity, they would kind of go off on their own in either very small bachelor groups or just as independent animals. And elephants, and we can assume mammoths too, are extremely intelligent animals. They have a great sense of empathy, not only for each other, but sometimes that extends to people. Only in very rare instances, wild animals are extremely unpredictable. So I sure wouldn't count on the empathy of an elephant if I ran into one. But you can be sure if you're looking at a herd of mammoths that they would do their very best to protect one another, and you probably don't want to deal with a herd of angry and defensive mammoth cows. And so I think they would have gone after the bulls, even though the bulls were quite a bit larger. The bulls could be 11 feet or maybe a tad more at the withers. They could weigh more than 6 tons. They could have tusks. I think the record was 14 or 15 feet long. These were substantial animals and just incredibly powerful in a way that we can hardly comprehend. Those of us, who might have to deal with maybe a moose or something, would be dwarfed in comparison to a mammoth. So I tend to think that they would have had to have found a way to compromise the animal's strength, because when you're dealing with an animal that size, and we're not talking like a gazelle that's, whose instinct is to run away, an animal like an elephant or a mammoth would stand its ground and try its best to knock you down or stamp you down or whatever. So my thought was that, for example, in one of my books, they knew that there was a place where the bulls spent the night in the middle of a lake, frozen lake. And the benefit for the bulls choosing the frozen lake was they'd be able to see a great distance around them so that no predators, like say a cave lion or something, would be able to sneak up on them and attack them while they were sleeping. They were fairly safe in the middle of the frozen lake. So they decided that while the bulls were out grazing for the day, that they would set a fire in a certain spot in the frozen lake, not too far from the edge, where when the bulls returned for the night, one of them might step into the weakened spot. And I might add, it was snowing, so that by the time night fell, the falling snow had disguised the spot where they had weakened the ice. And that's how they got the mammoth to fall partially through the ice so that they could attack it and kill it. In another one of my books, they basically harried the mammoth like a pack of wolves. I would suspect for the Neanderthal, this often wasn't an option, because it is thought at this time that they hunted in small groups. But if you could get a large enough group to basically harry the animal on all sides, while others were keeping the mammoth confused and occupied elsewhere, you could try to attack the mammoth's back end. My understanding is that the skin is actually thinnest, maybe only 1/10 of an inch thick, up by the anus. And while it's not a terribly dignified way to go, it would be an expedient way to get the animal to bleed out and thus not only die more quickly, but potentially lose some of its vigor more quickly. Because when you have an animal that size, when it's wounded and mad, you're probably not in a very good position. So, you need to you need to have this animal bleed out and pass on as quickly as possible. So that is my thought, that whether disabling it in some way or harrying it like a pack of wolves, that they would be trying to attack the less lethal back end where it was most vulnerable. I have read about other instances where they thought they might have dug pits for mammoths to fall into. And I must say that would be a heck of a digging project with no metal shovels or tractors or anything like that would help dig the hole, mammoth-sized hole. I've read that they thought they might have driven them off cliffs, but these were prairie animals that lived on grass, and may not have been a lot of cliffs around to choose from, but hey, if you've got a cliff available and you think you can get it to fall over, good luck to you. So my suspicion was that in general, they would have probably either hoped to happen upon an animal that was bogged down in a swampy area, or created a place where they could entrap the animal, like the weakened ice, so that the animal would be compromised in some way so that they could attack it without its having its full complement of strength to use against you. So I don't know. Do you have any questions, Joe?
You pretty much covered everything I was going to ask. As I asked you before, I was going to read that the mammoth hunting segment from book 2?
Two, yes.
Yes, 2.
Yes.
But instead, it's better to hear it from you directly, and then you can just give a brief summary of it. But yeah, you pretty much covered the basis of everything I was asking for people, so I appreciate that.
Okay, all righty. But yeah, that's my take on it. I'd be very interested to hear what other people have to say about it.
I've got a lot of people.
Really? That's great.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Do you quickly just want to let people know where they can find you? I'll obviously have all the links to everyone's media in the description.
Okay, and just give my main website, which is dreamerliteraryproductions.com.
Thank you again for coming on. I appreciate it. And anyone who hears this, please go check out her books. They're amazing.
Oh, thanks for saying so. Appreciate it.
There is no way to truly know how Neanderthals hunted mammoth and other proboscideans like the giant straight-tusked elephant, but it is fun to speculate in videos like these. For all we know, it could have been a mix of multiple things. Maybe it was a Neanderthal tradition for a bunch of men to go and hunt a mammoth once a year, or every couple of years, like a giant gathering, which, talking about the Neanderthals at the cliffs of Jersey, it appears that this might have been the case. Evidence showing that Neanderthals used the caves at the cliffs of Jersey on and off for tens of thousands of years. This could have been a Neanderthal gathering, and maybe we'll find out in a future video. Now I want to talk about how I think Neanderthal hunted bison or aurochs. Both the European bison and the aurochs were forest-dwelling animals. Knowing this, we can assume the Neanderthals were pure ambush hunters when hunting these animals. From my understanding, aurochs would live right at the tree line, giving the perfect opportunity to sprint up to them and stab them in the ribs. Again, like Ryan Gill said, it doesn't take much to bring down an animal, you just have to get a gut shot on them. Or, if the Neanderthals were accurate, they could have gone and driven their spears, or as Sean said, a lance, into the heart or lungs of the animal, bringing them down in hours, if not minutes. I do not think Neanderthals would be thrusting their spears into mammoth. However, evidence shows that they would be thrusting their spears into other animals like deer, elk, boar, horse, and as mentioned, aurochs and bison. Again, it would have taken a group of hunters and some forward planning, something that Neanderthals must have been experts at. Don't forget that while aurochs are the ancestors of modern-day cattle, they were still about 4 times the size of the largest bulls today. And bisons, in my own experience, are not tiny animals themselves. I guess it still would have been dangerous, but I think possible. I believe a lot of people underestimate the power of these first Europeans, I should say Eurasians, and just how smart they were. I don't think a clan of Neanderthal hunters would have a big problem bringing down an aurochs or a bison. They had over 300,000 years to perfect this hunting technique, but let me know what you think down below. Before I end this video, I want to play the final 2 clips from Memma the Cavewoman and the Modern Witch Doctor. I want to thank everyone who took time out of their days to do this for me and the audience. We all appreciate you. Links to all their channels or websites down below. Thank you guys so much. That was a kiss, by the way.
Excuse the background noise, I'm actually at a school at the moment, but Joe asked me my take on how Neanderthals and early humans like Heidelbergensis would have hunted large animals. Now we know they did, or we at least know they ate them because of various archaeological finds. I think the easy answer is they would have used whatever method was suited best to the opportunity. So it might have been that they used fire to chase them off a cliff or into a canyon or into a narrow space where they could kill them by some means. It might have been that if they had to, they actually jumped on it and basically rode it like a rodeo ball until they could get a spear in it. There's evidence in the form of the number of fractures they have in their hands and things like that. I don't think they were limited to just one method. They were maybe not quite as inventive as us, but they weren't stupid by any means, and they would have come up with a way of hunting stuff that suited the circumstances. Neanderthal spears have been shown to be throwable. They are, not as aerodynamic as ours. They're much heavier, but they still can be thrown. They've done experiments with modern athletes who have experience throwing javelins. Those spears will penetrate quite a good long way into a big animal from a fair distance. So that might have been a later development, probably not as early as Heidelbergensis, but certainly later Neanderthals had that. So yeah, I think it's narrow-minded of us to kind of limit them to any one method. I think they'd have done whatever the circumstances demanded to get food. Because without it, they would have been well aware of the fact that they were dead.
Hi, Joe. And for those that don't know me, I am Kayce with Modern Witch Doctor. To give a little brief about what I do, I run a business where we teach outdoor skills to children. We teach primitive skills, survival skills. I do a lot of primitive pottery classes. I am a primitive archer. And really just an amateur archaeologist. I spend a lot of time trying to learn as much as I can about our primitive ancestors, whether they be Homo sapiens or Neanderthals. Now, I was asked to speak today about my opinions on hunting techniques and methods of Neanderthals hunting mammoths. So with most of us, I'm sure we all can speculate how this was done. Now, if we look at a modern elephant, we understand that, in trying to hunt in a big creature like this, you're not going to be able to get within arm's reach of this creature. So most of us have the belief and theory that Neanderthals and primitive Homo sapiens were using spears to take down these large creatures. I have to agree with this. This obviously seems the most logical explanation of how they were doing it, because once again, nobody is going to be able to get within arm's reach, usually, of an angry elephant, let alone an angry mammoth. Now, with this being said, I do think that there was a lot of techniques that came into play, such as stealth methods. So creeping, hiding, really trying to surprise their prey. I also believe that they would have singled out the females and the young, obviously for easier targets. I have a theory that, if there were areas that had water or mud, I think that it was very possible that Neanderthals obviously had witnessed a lot of creatures getting stuck in these mud beds and these riverbanks. And obviously, unless it is a water-dwelling creature, they're not going to be as agile in the water. So I think by driving and confining these animals to areas that made it a little easier for them to throw their spears or at least get within a closer range. Now, another theory that I have, which this is obviously just speculation, I understand that Neanderthals were a lot more energetic than human beings or Homo sapiens. So they needed to move. They moved a lot more than we, as Homo sapiens, were sitting and, let's say, making cordage. But I kind of have a theory that I believe for any primitive ancestor, Neanderthal and Homo sapiens, that it would have been possible to try to net or snare or tie up the legs of some of these big creatures. Because in reality, if you were able to confine the legs of, let's say, a mammoth, you could easily knock it over and then be able to get within arm's reach to do a lethal shot. So this is just a theory. I don't know how much cordage and things like that was being made by Neanderthals, and even if there's been any evidence of netting or anything like that found. But this would be a really great theory, and something that me as a human being, if I was putting myself in that position and thinking how I would try to attempt to kill, I think the easiest solution and less dangerous is going to be the best. So these are my theories. Once again, I am by far a professional hunter. I have never hunted an elephant or a mammoth. So this is all just speculation. But through my studies and through a lot of interaction with wildlife, this would be my speculation. So Joe, I hope this was informative enough for you, my friend. And I appreciate you asking my opinion and my advice. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of Joe's video, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I know it was super long, probably the longest video I've ever made. But anyways, here I'm going to show you some Neanderthal equipment. I'll lightly set that down. Anyways, sorry. So here I have two spears. One is a fire-hardened spear, and the other one is a hafted spear. These were both made by myself. So, as mentioned before by Memma the Cavewoman, and I don't remember who else, this would have been used by Homo heidelbergensis 500,000 years ago, and it sort of would have been phased out by the time of the late Neanderthals. Now, I'm about 5'8", and these are about 6.5 feet tall. A lance, on the other hand, would have been 8-9 feet tall. So I'm about the same height as a male Neanderthal would have been, and these are a little short. These will probably be made more for aurochs and bison, deer, and all that. This, on the other hand, something like this, the hafting and all that, would have possibly been used to hunt mammoth. I made this almost 5 years ago, so it's a little sloppy compared to my more modern stuff, but it's a good example. They're thick. Oops, I just hit the ceiling. But they're thick, hefty spears. I'm not sure how well you can see that. You can throw them, and obviously you can thrust with them. And so those are two examples of sort of spears we were talking about during the videos. These would have been used by I should say late Homo heidelbergensis, early Neanderthals, and these would have been used by sort of, I guess you'd say late Neanderthals, maybe even early Homo sapiens. And then, so there's some lithics for you guys as well. This, right here, this is a Levallois blade. Not sure how well you can see it, but it's got the classic beveled edges on it. There goes my wardrobe. And then to butcher a mammoth or something, they most likely would have used a tool like this. Now this is called a bout coupé hand axe, commonly found in Doggerland or France, the stronghold of the Neanderthals. So that was just a quick video on spears and hand axes. And I hope you enjoyed my how do I think, and others, how do we think Neanderthals hunted the mighty mammoth. See you guys. Thanks for watching this long video. In conclusion to the question of how do I think Neanderthal man hunted woolly mammoth, well, we don't have the slightest clue. And there was absolutely no one-glove-fits-all method. Anyways, as always, let me know what you think in the comments. I'm very curious as to how all of you think Neanderthals hunted mammoth. Please be respectful in the comments, as no one truly knows, like I said. But it was fun to see how everyone had pretty much the same answer with different twists. With that being said, we can only assume that Neanderthal hunting tactics varied from tribe to tribe, but followed the same general rules. As always, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.